Knife only. One of the staple challenges of Resident Evil since its inception. While the games have evolved over time to include more complex scenarios and intricate mechanics, restricted runs like this continue to persist. But why do they, even when it might contradict developer intentions? I'd say that it's born out of a desire to stress the games to their limits, to see how far the most basic of tools can take you. Ambitious as it may be, the reality of this pursuit is that you're not just fighting the enemies and bosses, you're fighting the design of the game itself. It fundamentally changes what it takes to win, and I'm going to show you exactly what it takes in Resident Evil 4 Remake, on the highest difficulty with no damage being taken, starting with Chapter 1. With the inventory now accessible, I'm able to send the handgun into storage. I do so right away just to kick the run off properly. Now armed with nothing but a brittle piece of steel, I head down into the basement where the first enemy encounter of the game takes place. Engaging in combat here is ill-advised, so I'll be running past this upcoming enemy. An easy method is simply to run up to this board and briefly stop Leon in front of it before squeezing through on the right. I'm not sure why that works, but I'm grateful for it. The remaining enemies in the house aren't aware of Leon's presence, so they pose no threat. As such, I'm able to escape without incident. The enemies here will never drop any loot, so there's nothing to gain in fighting them. It would be a poor use of knife durability. Knives have a limit on how much they can be used before they break. Almost every action involving the knife will drain durability, which is visually represented by a meter beneath the knife icon on the HUD. Breaking barrels and crates won't reduce that meter, but things like attacking enemies and parrying will. As with any other resource, durability needs to be carefully managed. Expending it recklessly would quickly break the knife and leave me completely helpless. My offensive and defensive options are largely dependent on having a knife, so I can't afford to ever be without one. Since there are a few enemies on the way to the village that are worth dispatching, I'll be able to demonstrate some of those options, the most prominent of which, and arguably the most powerful, is the parry. Parrying offers some strong options to select from. In this case, I chose to follow it up with a melee attack which happened to deal critical damage. This next enemy is dealt with by luring him into a bear trap, which allows me to instantly kill him with a melee attack. I use another parry and melee combo to take on the last enemy here. Since he survived the initial strike, I have to manually stab him until he's down for good. These are the kind of tactics that I will be making use of throughout the whole run. Parrying is an indispensable tool that needs to be mastered in order to stand a chance. Something to keep in mind about professional difficulty is that it only allows perfect parries. Those are parries that are done within a tight and specific window of timing, as in immediately before an enemy's attack would make contact. Lower difficulties offer an extended window of timing in the form of partial parries. They don't offer the same benefits as perfect parries, but they can still prevent damage from being taken. Without that luxury, understanding the timing of the many attacks in this game is important knowledge to have. Before heading into the village fight, I backtrack to the typewriter to make a save. Another aspect of professional difficulty is that there are no autosaves. Dying means getting sent back to the most recent manual save. Because this is a no damage run, that also means I have to reload from my last save whenever I take damage. I'm not playing for an S+ rank on this run, so I'll be saving liberally. Now that I'm entering the village, I'm going to take the left path and head straight towards the shotgun house. There's some loot to pick up along the way, as well as an enemy with their back turned. I could perform a stealth kill on this enemy, but I opt not to as it won't make much of a difference with the strategy I plan to use here. This path to the house is usually pretty safe, even though I almost got grabbed. Once I get inside, I usually push this bookcase to block the window. I only do that out of habit. It's not necessary for the strategy. Now heading upstairs, I want to kick down the ladder at this window. The turnout here can be a little random. Sometimes enemies are immediately on that ladder, while other times there won't be any at all. Sometimes a hatchet will be perfectly thrown through the window, straight into Leon's face. Just a few things to be mindful of. This house gives me access to these rooftops, which are going to be helpful for my strategy. My game plan here is to run the clock, and the roofs are going to provide ample stalling time later. Just not so much now as I'm being pressured off of them by Dr. Salvador. I need to survive for somewhere around 4.5 to 5 minutes in order for the sequence to end. To accomplish this, I'm going to take laps around the village. As I do, I'll be periodically stopping where I can not only to stall, but also to influence the enemy's pathfinding. I want them to be congregating behind me, rather than trying to cut me off. This shed is a decent place to hold out for a little more time. The enemies typically will only ever try to get inside through the door, so the window offers a quick escape route. I try to stall some more behind the shed before heading down this path to the wooden fence. I'm able to hang out here for a moment before jumping down. It's another decent spot since the enemies are mostly coming from one direction and they are fairly slow at mantling. I squeeze as much time out of this spot as I can before I start making my way back to the shotgun house. The spawns in this sequence are kind of ambiguous, so enemies can appear in unexpected locations. Luckily, that one was easy to dodge. Now that I'm back on the rooftops, I'm going to run between the two ladders leading up here and repeatedly kick them down. This is going to burn a fair amount of time because the enemies will keep trying to raise them back up. The only other way to get up here is through the house, and it takes a while before they start trying to do that. This is one of the more powerful defensive positions that can be held in the whole village, so I try to get as much out of it as I can. At this point, I see somebody coming through the back window. I interpret that as the enemies finally figuring out that they can flank me through the house, but it's just this one guy, and he jumps back down, allowing me to stay up here for 40 more seconds. That's an example of the sometimes peculiar behavior the AI can exhibit. Even on professional difficulty, it's not uncommon to see enemies making illogical decisions or being outright passive. It's honestly perplexing. It can be helpful in some instances and frustrating in others. It worked out in my favor here as I'm able to continue abusing the ladders for longer than usual. But eventually the enemies start catching on. I see that one of them is trying to break through the window. It's rare for that window to not be already broken. It bought me a little more time, but now I have to abandon the ladders and make my way to the other sides of the roof. Once there, it's simply a matter of stalling until I get pressured out. There isn't much else I can do after several enemies successfully make it up here. Fighting them would be a poor investment, so I'm just going to make my escape. I do my best to avoid the enemies along the way as I begin my second lap around the village. And that's basically all there is to this strategy. I'll be taking the same route I did before and stalling where I can. Overall, this is a fairly easy way to get through the village fight. The tricky part is getting it done without damage, but that's only due to the capricious nature of this encounter. But I understand that it's not the most exciting strategy to watch. That's why I've decided to include some bonus footage after the chapter ends. In it, I show how to kill Dr. Salvador in this fight with just a knife. It's very costly on knife durability, which is why I didn't do it in this run. The alternative win condition for the village fight is to kill around 15 enemies. Easily doable with guns and grenades, but a tad extreme for knife only. It may not even be possible for the combat knife without upgrades, not without statistically improbable amounts of luck at least, so running the clock was my most realistic option. It also lets me save durability for the encounters after this fight. The siege comes to an end when the bell rings. Before getting pulled into the cutscene, I managed to climb to the top of the tower and grab the green herb that's there. It works out nicely, since the cutscene will always relocate Leon to this designated spot on the map. With the enemies gone, I'm free to go around and loot the village. There are some treasures to collect, as well as several other items. While it might seem superfluous to be picking up things that I can't use on this type of run, I can still get value out of them. Treasures, weapons, grenades, ammunition, healing items, and even used up key items all can be sold to the merchant. The merchant is a helpful character who offers upgrade and repair services for the combat knife in exchange for money. I want those upgrades as soon as possible, and knife repairs will be needed regularly, so it's in my best interest to build up money as quickly as I can. I should also mention that while I do have the extended treasure map DLC, I won't be getting any of those extra treasures. I want this run to reflect the base game experience, so none of the DLC will be used. So while I'm sweeping the village for what I can, there are some buildings that I won't be going into. 2 of them can't be accessed right now, and entering the one I can access will spawn an additional enemy that I don't want to deal with. I'll be coming back here a few times in later chapters, so I'll get everything eventually. Admittedly, I do collect a lot more than what is necessary for this run. I just want it to be thorough. After cleaning out the village, I move on towards the farm. The remainder of Chapter 1 is quite easy. There aren't going to be any threats on the level of the village fight. Still, I choose to put down a save, just so I don't have to risk repeating that encounter. I'm showing all of my saves just for the sake of transparency. It also reaffirms the fact that I'm playing on professional each time I show it. I did say that I would be saving liberally, but I still try not to over-abuse it. The farm is a simple area to get through. There are 2 enemies out in the open that can be taken out with stealth kills. Stealth kills are instant kill moves that can be done on unaware enemies. Their durability cost is very low, making them an especially efficient option. They are one of the many kinds of special interactions the knife can have with the enemies. Each one varies in how much durability it consumes, and some take a lot more than others. Thoughtlessly using them can lead to the knife breaking prematurely, so it's important to be able to gauge how much these actions will cost. The path out of the farm is blocked by a gate, so I'll need to find a way to open it before I can get out of here. The way to do that is through this room, and inside of here there's a bomb trap. I could disarm it, but instead I'm going to leave it active, as I'll be able to make great use of it against a particular enemy in a short while. To open the gate, I'll have to find the missing wooden cog, which can be found inside the barn. Entering the barn will cause several additional enemies to spawn, so I have to be mindful of that. As such, I like to break this window from the outside to lure the enemy inside over to me. I mentioned earlier that enemies are slow at mantling. It makes for a good opportunity to deal damage. Here, I'm able to get enough stabs to take this one out before she can do anything. It's more efficient to aim for the head when attacking this way. I was just trying to set up a suplex, but she died before that could happen. I'm now making my way towards the barn from the back side. This route I'm taking will allow me to loot everything along the way, find the missing cog, and easily escape from the farm. Most notable of the items here is the kitchen knife. That is the only spare knife available in Chapter 1, and I'll talk more about those in a moment. Just now, a new enemy type has smashed down the door and is coming after me. This enemy is known as the Brute, and this particular one is the hammer-wielding variant. As the name suggests, he's quite a bit tougher than the other enemies. Taking him on with the knife would be a pain, but that bomb trap from earlier is going to make it a whole lot easier. I make sure to open the gate before jumping back down to where the bomb is. Aside from the Brute, there are 4 other enemies that spawn along with him. The path I've taken since entering the barn ensures that they won't ever even spot me. I'll be free to leave once I put the Brute out of commission. Once he shows up, he'll walk into the bomb and be put into a state that allows me to follow up with a stronger knife attack. It's a little costly on durability, but it's well worth it as it puts him near death. 1 or 2 more stabs will be all it takes to put an end to him. That's all there is to the farm. Short and straightforward. There isn't much there to worry about. The cows are more threatening than the enemies, honestly. It's rare, but they can spontaneously become really aggressive. I always try to keep my distance from them. Going back to the kitchen knife, that is one of the 2 kinds of spare knives available in the game. Compared to the combat knife, spare knives have far less durability and they can't be repaired. Once they break, they're gone for good. From Chapter 2 onwards, they can be obtained from random loot drops when Leon has less than 3 knives in his inventory. That is a mechanic that I won't be making too much use of in this run. There are many fixed locations for spare knives throughout the game, and I have designated uses for all of them, so I'll be using the combat knife exclusively except for situations where it alone isn't enough. Getting back on track, this area is brief and easy. I'm going to stay towards the right and hug the wall as I move forward. This movement will prevent a pitchfork carrying enemy from charging at me, making it easy to run past her. There's little reason to engage in combat here. The linear path and placement of the enemies incentivizes running, so that's what I do. Even if I wanted to kill the enemies, there are 2 that are out of reach for the knife. I'm better off saving the durability for the next area anyway. This is the lakeside settlement, and right away I'm going to chase down a fleeing enemy who will always run into a bear trap. Inside the house is an enemy who throws dynamite. There's a good chance that he'll blow himself up with it, which is far safer than trying to fight him. I'm going to make use of some more environmental traps in the area to take out a few more enemies. The bomb and bear trap will each secure a kill for me, so they're certainly worth taking advantage of. I need to be careful with these 2 particular enemies since they like to throw their hatchets. It gives them a long range attack, but it also halts their movement, which can make it a little annoying to get them into these traps. I try to sidestep this hatchet, but he threw it at an angle I didn't expect, so I'm forced to parry it. I get lucky in that he decides to sprint right afterwards, ensuring that he gets caught by the bear trap. Enemies have an ability to just ignore bear traps, but they can only use that if they're walking. If they're running, they'll always get caught. This enemy caught me by surprise. I wasn't expecting him around the corner, so I just use a parry, melee, and some stabs to take him out. I end up taking off his leg too, which means that last stab dealt critical damage. There are 2 more dynamite enemies in the area left which I'm trying to be wary of, but I can also use them to blow up the other enemies. I'm going to see if I can get that to happen as some more enemies come after me. It works out as this guy with the pitchfork gets his arm blown off. Then this other guy runs into the bear trap, in which he promptly loses his leg. A parry dismembers the pitchfork guy's last good arm and puts him down for good. Depriving an enemy of both of their arms is an instant kill at this stage in the game. All enemies can do when they have only one arm is punch, which is easy to parry. At this point, I decide that I should just head into the house now rather than dealing with the remaining enemies. Trying to take out the dynamite throwers is an unnecessary risk. The end of the chapter is in this house, so running straight here without fighting any of the enemies is an option. I just thought it would be more interesting to show off how the various traps and friendly fire from the dynamite can be utilized. There's more loot in this area to grab that I'm leaving behind, but I'll be back here in a later chapter to get what's left. There's just one enemy left, and he can be dealt with easily by quickly running up to him and hitting the knife prompt. Note that this isn't a stealth kill. Knife prompts on kneeling enemies are always treated as combat executions, which drain more durability. I'm left with just a sliver of it afterwards, which is pretty good considering how much optional combat I engaged in this chapter. And that will close out the chapter. I'm going to be showing the chapter results at the end of every video. That always reaffirms the difficulty and shows that I've taken no damage. I also save at the end of every chapter, which I'll be showing as well. This isn't the end of the video though, as I did promise bonus footage. So let's see what it takes to kill Dr. Salvador in the village fight with just the knife. As I did before, I'm going to take the left path and make my way towards the shotgun house. But this time, I am going to stealth kill the enemy along the way. She's right next to a ladder that appears after I enter the house, and she can cause problems by showing up much earlier than the other enemies. I don't want to deal with that, as I need the space to be able to fight Salvador one-on-one. As such, pushing this bookcase will help for buying a little more time for that purpose. I'm also going to run upstairs to kick down the ladder at the window as I did before. I hesitated in front of the window as I heard an enemy preparing to throw a hatchet. Now it's just a matter of waiting for Salvador to break in so we can begin our fight. Salvador has one big weakness that I'm going to exploit, and to do that, I'll need to lure him over to a window. Firstly, I want to get him to mantle through the window. While he's doing that, I'm going to try to get some stabs in on his face. Once he makes it over, I position myself behind him and continue stabbing at his head. I can't risk getting too greedy with this as the other enemies are closing in, so I'm forced to abandon early. But that is Salvador's weakness. He is very slow to turn around. It provides ample opportunity to build up stun damage on him, which will eventually let me use a knife prompt on him. That is how I'm going to kill Salvador. I'll be able to get another attempt at stunning him once I reach the shed. There's a window here to use against him. This area is a bit dangerous though since the other enemies are right behind him. They can throw hatchets through the window and also flank me by going around the shed. It would be too risky to get more than a few stabs in, so I don't stick around for long. Jumping over the nearby fence can create a similar situation, but it's far too open of an area to effectively capitalize on. The enemies get in the way too quickly for me to get anything out of it. For now, I'm going to head back to the shotgun house so I can start the loop again. As I'm getting back up to the roofs, I want to make sure that Salvador is following closely. I need him to be on the ladder before any other enemy. That way I can get some space to fight him alone. Now that he's climbing up, I quickly run over to the other ladder to kick that down. That ladder is closest to the windows I'm about to use, so doing that buys me a little more time. I'm getting somewhat unlucky so far. Not only has he not been stunned a single time, but he even manages to turn around quickly here. Things are complicated further with another enemy in the mix, but since she has a weapon, I can use her to set up a stun on Salvador via parrying and melee. That gives me one of the two knife prompts I'll need to take him down. I tried to use a parry to do it again, but unfortunately Salvador wasn't hit at the correct angle to get the wall stun. No other choice now but to jump down and take another lap around the village. Only this time, I change up the route so I can go over to where the cow is. There's a lantern there that will fall down and set the floor on fire. I want Salvador to catch on fire, as that will deal enough damage for him to die to the second knife prompt. After successfully lighting him up, I return to my usual path and go towards the shed. My plan is the same as it was on my previous lap, only now I have to play more cautiously as the other enemies are much more spread out. Once again at the window, I try to get a few more stabs in while it's safe to do so. I feel that it's too risky to try to get behind him now, so I head to the fence early. I'm hoping to close this out there. He's taken a lot of damage already, so he should be close to getting stunned. Unfortunately, I'm not able to get it here. I'll have to take him back to the shotgun house. The path there is blocked by enemies, and I end up getting cut off by more enemies on the way around. But the stars align, and I managed to pull off what is honestly one of the craziest parries I've done in this game. Everything that needed to go right in that moment went right. The unarmed enemy didn't try to grab me. The pitchfork enemy did the charge attack. I didn't miss the parry. My melee attack knocked back all 4 enemies, and I didn't get chainsawed in the back. I knew right then and there that this was going to be the successful attempt. After bringing Salvador back into the house, I go for more stabs at the window, and I finally get the stun on him. I follow up with a knife prompt and put him in the ground at last. For what's left of the fight, I return to my stalling strategy. There's only a little time left before the sequence ends. Killing Salvador with only the knife is going to use up almost all of the fight's timer in most cases, so I don't have to spend much time at all running around before the bell rings. When it does, I try to move quickly back towards the spot where Salvador died. I just wanted to see if I could get his treasure before the cutscene started. I was surprised that I barely managed to do it too. That'll close out the coverage for Chapter 1. I show that my knife isn't upgraded, I didn't take any damage, and confirm that I'm on professional difficulty before the video ends. Overall, Dr. Salvador isn't too tricky to take down with the knife. Doing it without taking damage is the hard part, and that's only because of the volatility inherent to the village fight. Even then, it's still not much compared to the challenges I'll be facing in later chapters. Things are only just getting started in this playthrough. There's a lot to look forward to. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video when I cover Chapter 2. Take care.